Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, March the 12th, 2025. Today there is a conjunction between the Sun and Saturn, and this is what I want to talk about in detail in this video. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, Wednesday, March the 12th. If you like this video, I would be happy if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be very grateful if you were to subscribe. And here is the picture of the planets today. So this is for today, Wednesday, set for New York. And the moon is now in Virgo. You can see that at noon in New York on Wednesday, March 12th, the moon is at 4 degrees, 10 minutes Virgo. So that means that the emphasis has changed a little. You know, we did have the moon in Leo. That provided a fair amount of fire. You know, we still have a Mercury-Venus conjunction in Aries, but we used to have the moon in Leo as well, 3 personal planets in fire signs. So that has changed. Moon in Virgo, Earth sign, and now we have a personal planet in an Earth sign. You know, before, we had nothing in an Earth sign except for Uranus. And you know, Uranus, it's a transpersonal planet, a generational planet. When one's doing the elemental balances, one doesn't really count them. So with the moon in Virgo, there is also a feeling that things are beginning to be clearer, maybe, because you know, with the lack of Earth, it may have been a bit uncertain about where things were, and we might have sort of lost touch with material details, and we might have been somewhat ungrounded. But the moon in an Earth sign, you know, does change that. Now, the Sun is in Pisces, so that means that we get the run-up to a full moon. Now, that full moon, which is a total eclipse of a moon, actually, is exact on, I think, Friday. So it's not here yet, but now that the moon is in Virgo and the Sun is in Pisces, we can feel it. The Sun and the moon are in opposite signs, and we get the feeling that something is reaching a peak, perhaps, that things can't go any further, that the lunar cycle is about to transition from waxing to waning. But we've still got a bit of time left with that waxing moon. So you know, that's the moon in Virgo. It's interesting that I just did a video on Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister designate in Canada. And as I understand it, Justin Trudeau is still the Canadian Prime Minister. So we're waiting for this transition. So when is he actually going to get sworn in? And I thought it was going to be this week. So the best time for him to have been sworn in would have been right at the beginning of the week, you know, when the moon was in Leo, when it was making trines to Mercury and Venus. But they kind of left it rather too late. And so the worry might be that Mark Carney is going to get sworn in at the time of his full moon. So it's not good to be sworn in, Canada's new Prime Minister, with the full moon, although maybe they'll wait till next week. I don't know, it's just something that I noticed. So aside from a full moon, we have Mercury making a semi-square to Uranus. So yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday. We had Venus semi-square Uranus. Now we have got Mercury semi-square Uranus. So Mercury is 45 degrees from Uranus, and Mercury is the planet of ideas. It's a planet of communication, and on on a positive note, Mercury semi-square Uranus might be about getting sudden ideas. We suddenly have a plan about how we want to do things, or we might suddenly get very excited. Though Mercury is also the planet of communication, so we might say something unexpected, and because of what we say, we might cause a certain amount of discomfort. Then we have a conjunction between the Sun and Saturn. Now, this Sun conjunct Saturn has been building up for some time, and today it is exact. You can see that at noon, New York time, you've got the Sun at 22:20 Pisces, Saturn at 22:07 Pisces. I will, of course, be going into much greater detail about this Sun-Saturn conjunction later on in the video. But the Sun-Saturn conjunction is quite a heavy influence, although it may feel like the culmination of a process. Very often I find with Saturn transits, at least in my experience, they seem to get worse as they build up. But then the actual moment of the Saturn transit can often be a bit of a relief, and maybe that's how some of us are going to feel with this Sun conjunct Saturn. It's an aspect that happens every single year, so it's not an unusual aspect. And so this Sun-Saturn conjunction, may be a reflection of a certain amount of heaviness. Saturn and Sun, you could say they damage each other. The Sun damages Saturn because Saturn is combust. The Sun is damaged by Saturn because Saturn is just overwhelming the Sun or trying to keep the Sun down. Though, if you're into the concept of the Cazimi conjunction, so Cazimi conjunction is when two planets are, one of them has to be the Sun. When a planet is within 17 arc minutes of the Sun, and so the idea is that a Cazimi conjunction is fortunate. So Saturn might be strengthened as it gets very close to the Sun. So you could argue that this Sun-Saturn conjunction is something to welcome. It's a time to get things together, to organize ourselves. And that's certainly a possibility. But still, I do think that the Sun-Saturn conjunction is a rather heavy influence. So turning to the picture for Sydney, Australia. So if you're in Sydney, Australia, or if you're in Australasia in general, or if you're in East Asia, then at noon, the moon is still in Leo, late Leo. So for most of the day in Australasia, the moon is not in Virgo, it's in Leo, and the moon won't move into Virgo until this evening. So your experience of today might be somewhat different from the experience of someone in, for example, the US or Europe or Africa. It may feel that you're waiting for something to happen. The moon is void, of course, for most of the day. In other words, the moon has made its last major aspect before leaving the sign. Okay, it does make a trine to Chiron, but even that trine to Chiron is separating. So in Australasia, you don't have that immediate build-up to the full moon. And, instead, you may feel as if you are calming down from something. There's still some excitement in the air with moon in Leo, but it's not really going anywhere. And so it may just be a question of waiting and not feel that you have to make anything happen. Just, bide your time. And, of course, once the moon does move into Virgo, there'll be new challenges, and of course it will be the run-up to the full moon. Turning to the heliocentric picture, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system, we know that geocentrically we have Sun conjunct Saturn. Heliocentrically, that is Earth opposition Saturn. And indeed, in this chart, as is expected, we have Earth opposition Saturn. Earth in Virgo, opposition Saturn in Pisces. And in a way, looking at the heliocentric opposition with Earth is sort of more dramatic than when we look at it from a geocentric point of view. We're on Earth. This is our planet, and if you imagine a picture of a solar system, there is the sun in the middle of the chart, and the Earth and Saturn are the furthest point apart. So if you were having a space mission from Earth to Saturn, it's going to take even longer than usual, because you have to go across the sun. Obviously, you wouldn't go directly across the sun, but there is this challenge with Earth opposition Saturn. We're aware that things maybe aren't right, but things need to be organized. And then, of course, we've got Jupiter making that square to the Earth opposition Saturn. As I was saying yesterday, we have a T square, Earth opposition Saturn, with Jupiter on the T, and this is related to the economy, I think, and what the markets are doing. So I'm making this video on Tuesday. I sort of looked at what was going on in the markets. I didn't really look very closely. It seemed there was some kind of improvement. Things weren't as bad as they were the day before. So Monday was a sort of sea of red, and I think could be people getting used to this Jupiter-Saturn square being aspected by Earth. It'd be interesting to see what the markets are doing on Wednesday. I don't really make financial forecasts, but what I am saying is that what's happening in the stock market, if you're looking at it, it is, I think, really being influenced by that Jupiter-Saturn square, with which the Earth is currently involved in. So another way of looking at this chart is you can actually see a certain amount of symmetry here. So if you look at this Earth opposition Saturn, you've also at around 22 Virgo Pisces. We've also got Chiron Mars so Chiron is at 22 Pisces and Mars is at 21 Leo, so it's pretty close there. And so you can see an axis of symmetry with the Earth Saturn midpoint being in the same place as the Mars Chiron midpoint. So that brings the two together, and Earth Saturn might just be the awareness that things are difficult, that things are maybe even bad, and there is a weight of the world on our shoulders. And also there could be sort of feelings of guilt, and then it's linked up with Mars Chiron. Mars Chiron is about doing things differently. It's sort of standing out and not being afraid to be a rebel, particularly if it's necessary. If something needs to be done, something needs to be said. So if we put the whole thing together, we might say that some of us might feel that we have to respond to the situation. Maybe we feel that people are suffering because of the situation. Maybe we feel that we have to be heard and we have to do something that gets everyone's attention because it's our duty. So those are a few thoughts about the heliocentric picture, and now I'm going to look at today from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, March the 12th, 2025. Aries. Aries, things are in the process of changing. Moon is moving out of Leo into Virgo, and with the moon moving into Virgo, things are perhaps slowing down in one sense. I mean, I get the impression that, very recently you've been trying to get things moving and you've had some success, but there might have been a slowdown. You felt that you had done all you could do and you were wondering, what next? And with the moon moving into Virgo, You might have to deal with the consequences of your actions, or perhaps the consequences of your ideas and your ambitions. You might have ideas, things you want to put into practice, and you might realize, or have realized, that as it stands, you haven't quite got what it takes. And with the moon moving into Virgo, this is a chance to work out what needs to be done. And you might come to the conclusion that it's all about effort, not huge amounts of exhausting energy, but just making sure that everything is done properly and that you're able to relate things to the material world. You can't just be floating around full of ideas, maybe even full of anger, full of frustration that you want to create changes. And with Moon in Virgo, you have to be more fundamental about it and just accept that it's not going to be always interesting. Some things just have to be done in a particular way, and periods of boredom should perhaps be welcomed rather than shied away from, because if there are no external stimuli, then you've got a clear path. You can sort things out in your own way. Now, with the moon in Virgo, for some of you, there may be a concern about health, or health may become sort of more important than usual. Now, the moon, of course, goes into Virgo once a month, though this time round it's maybe more important because there's a full moon coming up. So this full moon is on Friday, I think. And so with this full moon, you may have realizations about yourself and what you're doing to yourself, or what you could be doing better, which could in turn just make you feel healthier. And so if you take the full moon as a realization, you have to ask yourself, what conclusions could you come to? What conclusions are you starting to come to? And if you can act in a responsible way and put yourself first, then I think in the long term you will certainly benefit. And at the same time, through your careful efforts, Aries, you have a chance to free yourself from something. Something has been bugging you for a long time, and it's been a frustration. You may have been tied to a particular habit that you really want to get out of, and that habit could take many forms. It could be something you do every day. It could be about other people. I mean, that is a possibility. But you have a chance to free yourself from a certain responsibility, and by doing that, you can start to focus on other responsibilities, the responsibilities that matter. Turning to relationships, yesterday we had Venus semi-square Uranus, and Venus is a planet that has links with relationships in the Aries chart because of its rulership of Libra, your opposite sign. And today we've got Mercury also semi-square Uranus, and that might mean that some of your relationships are a little bit taxing. Other people may not be entirely predictable, and your own behavior may not be entirely predictable, particularly in terms of what you say. And although it's a day for trying to organize things, trying to make sure that everything is ship-shape, you're still capable of saying something, or perhaps doing something which could be a little bit unsettling. But what you're doing is expressing yourself, and that's always important. But if you really do feel a need to tell people who you are and what you want, then it's important that you get your timing right. And most things today should ideally be prepared. I know that spontaneity is important for the average Aries, but sometimes with spontaneity you can have too much of a good thing. Taurus. Taurus, the moon is starting to move into Virgo. And certainly if you're in Europe and the Americas, Africa, it's pretty much a Virgo day. And if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon won't go into Virgo until this evening. But with the moon moving into Virgo, you're feeling better. It's nice that the moon is moving out of Leo. When the moon was in Leo, it might have felt that just things were a little bit slow, particularly over the last day. That you were trying to get things together, but I'm not convinced that you were being particularly successful about it. And now that the moon is in Virgo, you can be more decisive, and you start to see options. And this may represent the Taurian perspective of the sign Virgo, because when we look at the 12 signs, we think that they have got fixed meanings, but actually what a sign means does depend on your sign. So if you are an Aries, you're going to see Virgo differently than if you're a Taurus. And if you're a Taurus, you probably can be a lot more constructive and optimistic about the sign Virgo than if you are an Aries. Virgo is a sign that is about the creation of something. You work hard on something, but you also create something that is unique to you out of this sign Virgo. And with the moon moving into this sign, I think that might be how you feel. Now, you don't have to expect immediate results once the moon moves into Virgo. The moon actually, when it moves into Virgo, doesn't immediately make any aspects. So it takes a long time to get going, and so you shouldn't be impatient. You're on the right track. You know what you'd like to do. You know what's exciting, and you can start moving in. You can start moving in that direction. But don't feel that you need to get immediate results. And it's actually quite possible that your first impulse is the wrong impulse. So if you feel that you want to do something, that something needs to be done, then it's absolutely possible that you don't understand what's happening, or you have an imperfect picture. And that's not a problem, provided you don't act on it. You give yourself a chance to work things through and try to understand what is going on. Although it's possible, Taurus, that you have an artistic bent, and if you do have an artistic bent, then what creates that lack of understanding could also be a very imaginative impulse. And so your imagination is going to be on great form as the moon moves into Virgo. So if you want to work on your imagination, work with your fantasies, but without putting anything into practice, unless you're creating a work of art, then if you're creating a work of art, then you can do what you like. Just allow your imagination and your impressions a free flow. But if you're doing something more material, for example, working with money or making big decisions, then you have to be careful, because your first impressions today might be wrong, and you just need to wait and just allow things to to play out. I think that could be really important if you don't want to make mistakes. But I don't want to take away from the moon moving into Virgo. The moon moving into Virgo represents a process, Taurus, where you start to understand what's happening and you get a grip with the material details. And this process will culminate in a day or two's time with the full moon, because we do now have a run up to a full moon, because the moon is in Virgo, it's opposition the sun in Pisces, so the lunar cycle is about to reach peak, and so watch it develop. And at the time of the full moon, which I think is on Friday, I suppose I should tell you exactly when that full moon is, if you're interested. That full moon is, it's on the 14th, March the 14th, which is a Friday. It's 6:55 London time, so that would be 7:55 in Europe. It would be very early in the morning in New York. It actually would be just before midnight in California on tomorrow, or on the West Coast. So it kind of depends where you are. But the run up to the full moon is important, and you just need to go with it, and you're not reach conclusions, but at the same time enjoy yourself. If you're not reaching conclusions, that's okay. You can just live in the present and take notes, and over the next day or two the picture will become increasingly clear. Gemini, Mercury is your ruler, and Mercury is making a semi-square to Uranus. That's a 45-degree aspect. And this 45-degree aspect between Mercury and Uranus could stir you up. It might make you more excitable than usual, and you might have ideas, and these ideas could appear to just come from nowhere. You feel that something is important, and you don't know why it's important, but it just happens, and you might actually have a change of mind. You thought you understood something, you thought you knew something, you thought you knew that something is what you wanted to do, and with Mercury semi-square Uranus, you might see things in a different way. And this could be challenging. Some Geminis might feel that they want to hold on to what they know, and that can be a Gemini feature. Geminis are supposed to be flexible, but every Gemini is capable of making up their mind and then sticking with it, and then just refusing to look at contrary evidence, and that can be quite a dangerous thing to be. Quite a dangerous place to be. So if you have made up your mind about something, there's a course of action that you just absolutely have committed yourself to, then keep thinking, keep reading, keep listening, and you might realize that your decision is actually based on a flawed premise. And Mercury semi-square Uranus might be about that realization. Now, just because you realize that something is based on a flawed premise doesn't mean you're going to do anything about it. It's sometimes more comfortable to stick with what your decisions are. And that might be a rare display of stubbornness, but it's not stubbornness that should be welcome. It's a time, remember, when the full moon is starting. The moon is in Virgo, the sun is in Pisces, the full moon is upon us. In many respects, a lot of things are going to be revealed. And if you think you understand everything at the moment, Gemini, I think you're wrong. I think there are more things to discover. And if you're a curious Gemini, you should welcome that. But some Geminis can be surprisingly stubborn. And talking about stubbornness, we have a conjunction between the Sun and Saturn today. It is exact. It's been building up for some time. And this conjunction between the Sun and Saturn is in Pisces. and it's in a part of your horoscope that's connected with your perceptions of your own direction. And this Sun conjunct Saturn could work in several ways. It might be very determined, very ambitious. You want to get something done regardless. And, as I've already said, you don't want to be too inflexible. You have to consider other possibilities. You have to consider the possibility that you've got something wrong. But with Sun conjunct Saturn, you just may be tempted to just ignore that and just you feel that, if you could just keep going in the same old way just for a bit longer, things will be fine. But that's unwise. But you should still be welcoming Sun conjunct Saturn because it does give you discipline and it allows you to move towards your goals. But try to remember that Sun-Saturn conjunction is in Pisces, and it's a mutable planet. It's a mutable sign. And what we may be talking about is a few last-minute changes. You think you've got everything sorted out, but just changing things just right at the end could make all the difference. You are probably 80% right, but there's still that 20% that could completely mess you up. And just remember that Sun-Saturn conjunction has a certain mutability to it because of its position in Pisces. So there is a chance there to create some changes as you move into the last half of a week, and it can make all the difference. It can make the difference between success and failure. And do listen to other people. Don't trust your own judgment. It's easy to make mistakes at the moment, Gemini, and it's easy to put your energy into the wrong places. And I think you do have the equipment and the information not to fall into this trap, but you've got to be very wary, and I think it's a day when you need to keep your eyes open. Cancer, Moon is moving into Virgo, and Moon moving into Virgo from a Cancerian perspective is probably quite a good thing. Cancer and Virgo are two signs that have a fairly easy relationship. Cancer is obviously a water sign. Virgo is an earth sign, but both are fairly passive, negative, feminine signs, and so they don't jar with each other. And so, all things being equal, Moon moving into Virgo is something that is good for you, makes things easier, less complicated. And when the Moon moves into Virgo, it doesn't immediately make any aspects, at least not major aspects. Major aspects to major planets. I mean, it does eventually make a square to Jupiter, but that square to Jupiter is a feature of tomorrow. So if the Moon is not making any major aspects, that might indicate, Cancer, that you have actually a certain amount of freedom. There's no pressure. You can do things as you want. No one's going to be telling you what to do, and you can make your own decisions, and so that does give you a fair amount of freedom. Now, probably the main aspect today is a conjunction between the Sun and Saturn, and this Sun-Saturn conjunction is going to have an impact on all of us, regardless of our sign. In your case, this Sun-Saturn conjunction, which happens every year, so it's not a super rare aspect, but it's It's not something that happens all the time. And with the Sun-Saturn conjunction, you may be thinking about what you believe in. What really is important to you, and that might relate to your spiritual beliefs. It might be about your political beliefs, and there are two trends going on. On one hand, with that Sun conjunct Saturn, Cancer, you might want to dig your heels in. You feel that you have understood the world, you've understood the way it is, and you don't really need to do any research. I mean, that could be an approach, or at least any more research. You understand the way things are, and you're going to argue your case, and you're not going to tolerate any differences of opinion. You're certainly not going to change your opinions yourself. I mean, that might be a temptation there. Though, if you look at it again, Cancer, it might occur to you that some of your beliefs and ideas have their limits. They can only take you so far. And this process of self-discovery actually needs to continue, because we had Saturn moving into Pisces beginning of 2023, and for Cancerians this could have been about ideas and what you believe in and how you see the world in a broad perspective. And this Sun-Saturn conjunction is a reminder that Saturn really is in Pisces. And ideally, you will realize that some of your ideas need to be fine-tuned. They don't explain everything. And in certain cases, it might be a good idea to listen to what other people say, because you haven't got all the answers. Now, this Sun-Saturn conjunction may additionally say something about relationships, because Saturn, of course, Saturn rules Capricorn, which is your opposite sign. And so with the Sun-Saturn conjunction, it's possible that someone close to you is perhaps a little bit blinkered. They can't see everything. Something is overwhelming them. They are still very much into themselves, and they're very confident, or they appear very confident, but there's something that is blinding them. And it's possible that they're being unreasonable because they don't want to change. So a lot of what I was talking about in terms of how you have got to be more flexible in terms of your ideas, that also relates to some of the people close to you. And with that Sun conjunct Saturn, you may be dealing with a person who is very stubborn and very sure of themselves. Maybe not just one person, maybe several people. And you have to work out the right approach. And, the right approach might be not to be confrontational, but also to be sort of more independent in terms of what you believe in. And you can't believe in things forever. You especially can't believe in things if circumstances are changing, and that might really be what it is about. The problem about having fixed beliefs is that fixed beliefs work, or may have worked, at a particular time when the world was a particular way, but the world is changing, and as the world changes, one's own beliefs have to change. I think that is very important. Though aside from beliefs, Sun conjunct Saturn can simply represent a person, possibly someone who is very important to you, who is unreasonably stubborn. And the reason they're stubborn is because they don't see the full picture. They are only looking at what they want to look at. Leo. I have been talking a lot in this video, and I will continue to talk a lot in this video, about a conjunction between the Sun and Saturn. The Sun is your ruler, and it's conjunct Saturn. It's exactly conjunct with Saturn. So, what does that all mean? Now, it might mean that you feel that something is holding you back. It's been holding you back on and off for some time, but now it feels very real, and you just can't do everything you want to do. I mean, lots of things you'd like to be doing, but for one reason or another, you're not getting it together, or there could be a certain lack of confidence here. You think the whole thing is rather heavy, and you might be of opinion that really there's nothing you can do. But that's not the only way you can deal with the challenge of Sun conjunct Saturn. Sun conjunct Saturn is about you getting yourself together. Saturn is the planet of hard work and responsibility. So Leo, if you are hardworking and responsible, then you have a chance to move beyond this Sun conjunct Saturn, or at least move beyond the negative connotations of this conjunction, and realize that if you actually put in the effort, then pretty much any obstacle can be removed. It's just gonna be difficult. So maybe you want to commit yourself to a particular plan of action of this Sun conjunct Saturn, and give it everything you've got. And I think that is possibly the right approach. Now, this Sun conjunct Saturn can be seen in a different way, and the Sun conjunct Saturn can be about relationships, because the Sun is ruler of Leo, Saturn is ruler of Aquarius, your opposite sign. So you put Sun conjunct Saturn together, and this might be about a close relationship that takes up a lot of your time. And that could be a good thing, or it could be a bad thing. It could be about you getting really close to someone, but it could be also about you and another person sort of messing each other up in your own different ways. And so you are capable of being quite overwhelming, but another person is capable of restricting your own freedom of action. So in terms of any relationship that you're in, however trivial, ask yourself, what is its function? Where is it going? Is it working? And are the two parties to this relationship benefiting? It's possible that neither party is benefiting. It's possible that one party is benefiting, the other party is not. And that is not a situation that is sustainable. Even if it's a situation where you're the one in control, you could be, because you're the Sun, the other person is Saturn, the other person is combusted by you. Although this Sun-Saturn conjunction today is very close. It's a cazimi conjunction within 17 arc minutes at times in a day. So a cazimi conjunction may indicate two people or two forces, the Sun on the other one side, the planet is conjunct on the other, being on the same wavelength. And so the right relationship today can actually work extremely well. So you have to judge the situation. I've given you some possibilities about how that Sun-Saturn conjunction is working, and what actually the symbolism means, and it is up to you to work out how that symbolism applies to you. Also, the Moon is moving into Virgo. The Moon is now out of Leo, and the Moon is moving towards a full moon. And that full moon is on Friday. In fact, it could be very late on Thursday if you're in on the West Coast, California or British Columbia. So I think British Columbia is now on daylight saving time. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this moon opposition to Sun is about reality. Well, it's about reality for everyone, but for you, it might have a financial element to it. Maybe you're starting to understand something about money with this full moon, or something about your resources, something about the way you're spending money, or the way someone else has been spending money. And I don't think that there's any immediate issue coming up, because today the moon, although it moves into Virgo, doesn't make any aspects. But tomorrow the moon will square Jupiter. Then, of course, you've got the full moon on Friday, and that's when there could be a moment of realization. And moments of realization, even when they're on difficult subjects like money, should be welcomed, because they allow you to make the right decisions, even if those decisions might feel rather harsh. Virgo, the moon is moving into your sign. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it might not move into your sign until fairly late in the day, but it's getting there. And if you're in the Americas, and certainly the moon is in Virgo pretty much all day. In London, moon moves into Virgo at 7:56 a.m. An hour later if you're in Paris or Rome or Berlin. So with the moon moving into Virgo, that does make you feel more active, and you become aware of possibilities, things you might like to do, and you can be a little bit sort of flexible about it. But you don't want to be in a situation where you do anything. I mean, some things should not be done. There's no doubt about it. Because, Virgo, there is some evidence that you get distracted by something that is, or at least has the potential to cause a fair amount of damage. I mean, at the very least, it could waste your time. It could lead to an actual loss or a regrettable situation. So don't get distracted. If something appears out of the blue, that doesn't mean you should follow it. If something is tempting, and you kind of know it's wrong, but it's tempting, then that shouldn't be part of your life today. You need to resist that temptation. And if you are doing something that you don't really know what you're doing, and if you're following another person's lead, then that should probably be avoided. But in broad sense, moon moving into Virgo suits you well, and you feel better able to assert yourself. And the moon, as it moves into Virgo, is starting to make a square aspect to Jupiter. Now that square aspect, Moon-Jupiter square, is more of a feature of tomorrow. But I wouldn't say that it's going to have no impact today, because it's an important aspect. Jupiter is in Gemini. It's in a mutable sign. It's in an angle from a Virgo viewpoint, and so with that moon square Jupiter, you may be able to get yourself together and have a real idea about what you would like to be doing, where you want to go. And you don't have to make any decisions, because as I've already suggested, there is a danger that you get distracted. Though maybe you can make decisions if you're dealing with things which you're very comfortable with. But it's something you're already involved with. We don't want any big detours today. Big detours could be very dangerous. But if you just keep going in the same direction, a direction that is right for you with that moon square Jupiter, then I think that you can cover a lot of ground, and your optimism will see you through. And yeah, you can be optimistic. That really is possible. You should be optimistic. And for Virgos, that is one of the challenges at the moment. Looking beyond the material minutiae and seeing the bigger picture, and just realizing that it can be something for you. You can be successful on your own terms. But we do have a conjunction between the Sun and Saturn today. That is the headline aspect. And this Sun-Saturn conjunction is in Pisces. Pisces is, of course, your opposite sign. And that Sun-Saturn conjunction might say something about relationships or certain people in your life. If we sort of visualize the Sun conjunct Saturn, that might be someone who is quite stubborn and they want things done their way, and they're not going away, and they're not going to budge. And the question is, what do you do about it? Well, you might feel that you have to accommodate another person, particularly if they're not prepared to compromise. But is that the right approach? Should people be rewarded for their stubbornness? If they don't want to change, then everyone else has to change around them, and that's not really a desirable situation. It might be that you need to just leave people to their own devices, and just let them get on with it. I remember seeing this film. This is sort of an exaggeration here. I remember I saw this film. I think it was a 60s film. It was a German film, and it was set in Hamburg. And the plot was it was about a nuclear scientist who he had his issues with society, whatever, and he stole some nuclear materials, and he turned up in this square in Hamburg outside the police station, and he chained himself to an atomic bomb, and he said that he had this device, and he was threatening to explode this atomic bomb. And of course everyone thought he was crazy to begin with, but when people realized his background, that he had been a nuclear scientist, and then they did radiation readings, and they realized that it really was a bomb, and so they had to negotiate with him, and in the end they realized that they just had to evacuate Hamburg without telling him. So they were giving him lots of fake news reports about the negotiations that were going on, and meanwhile the whole city was being evacuated. And in the end, I think the police left in a helicopter, and here was this man with his atomic bomb, and he was the only person left in Hamburg, and it was up to him what he did with his atomic bomb. I mean, I know that is an exaggeration, but some people are kind of like that, aren't they? They want to do things their way, and they insist, and at least they try to insist. And sometimes it's just best to leave them to their own devices. Just leave them alone. Let them have their way, but you don't want to have anyone else being impacted by it. And so that could be an approach. You may feel that some kind of negotiation is necessary, and you shouldn't forget that we do have a build-up to a full moon, and this full moon is exact on Friday. Could be very late on Thursday if you're on the west coast of the United States. And so moon going into Virgo, the countdown to this full moon really does start, and it may be that in the end this full moon shows you the truth about someone or perhaps a situation, and once you see that truth, you'll be in a position to take clear and decisive action. Libra, you shouldn't feel obliged There's nothing, Libra, that must be done. I mean, there might be pressure to do something, but do you have to give in to this pressure? I don't think you necessarily do. You should just do things your own way, and you might notice that other people are pressurizing you. I mean, not necessarily in a over way, but you might feel that you're supposed to join in with something. But do you have to? And it is a time, Libra, when your independence is quite important. Yesterday we had a semi-square between Venus and Uranus, and that Venus semi-square Uranus is sort of still around. You're still feeling it, and it just may be a time, Libra, when you want to just be yourself and not have to follow anyone else's lead. And I don't think that you're going to especially benefit from other people's company. I think that when you are relatively alone, you don't have to be completely alone, but when you're not being disturbed, not being bothered, that's going to be when you're on best form. Not everyone can be completely ignored. I mean, Venus is still in Aries, which is your opposite sign. So you have to consider other people's influence. But just because you consider another person's influence doesn't mean that you actually need to give into it. And don't allow yourself to be tempted to do something that you don't fully understand. There is some possibility that you engage in an action which is not going to have a good ending because you're tempted. It seems vaguely attractive. It seems the right thing to do, especially if other people are pushing you in a particular direction. But if in doubt, Libra, don't do it. You don't actually have to do it. It's not necessary. And as far as the absolute main aspect today, all of us, regardless of our sign, we have this same aspect, and it's the Sun conjunct Saturn. So this Sun conjunct Saturn is in Pisces, and this Sun conjunct Saturn, it happens once a year. And so this aspect for you this time round may say something about health and organization and how you're trying to sort out your life in a very sort of mundane way. And with Sun conjunct Saturn, you might feel that things are a little bit tough, that there's so much to do, and you may not know where to start, and it might be sort of getting you down a little. That Sun conjunct Saturn, it means that Saturn is combust. And in a way, Saturn could represent you because Saturn is exalted in Libra. And so Saturn in Pisces, exalted in Libra, conjunct the Sun. It just may be that it might just feel all too much. It might feel that everything around you is chaotic. And you don't know when to start. But the way to deal with this is to just make that first move. And there's no particular first move that you have to go through, provided everything is done in the end. And so you take that first step, and that just is the right thing to do. Though talking about steps, I mentioned Librans' feet quite recently, and I'm going to mention Librans' feet again. Sun Saturn conjunction is about restriction, restraint, and do think about your feet again. You've still got a lot of stuff in Pisces. Again, I'm probably exaggerating here, and I'm probably talking about something that is just not going to happen to you. It's not an issue, but one has to cover everything if one can. And so, do look after your feet with Sun conjunct Saturn. Don't put them under strain. That would be Sun conjunct Saturn in Pisces, because Pisces rules the feet. And so continue to be careful with your feet, and be careful where you step, and don't strain or sprain your feet, and make sure that you're wearing a good pair of shoes, and that your feet matter today, and they have been mattering quite a lot recently. But with that Sun conjunct Saturn, perhaps you need to be extra careful. Scorpio, the moon is now moving into Virgo, moving out of Leo. And with the moon moving into Virgo, you're probably going to find that there is less pressure on you. Moon is no longer in a sort of cardinal sign, no longer in Leo, and so with moon in Virgo, you probably have more freedom. You can do different things. You don't have to be tied to one course of action or another. And I don't think that today, at least, anything is going to happen which requires your immediate attention. So that might mean that you've got more choice than usual. So if you want to do something, go and do it. You can't expect dramatic results, but you've got your freedom, and you need to enjoy your freedom. As far as your social life is concerned, you're going to be fairly sociable, or at least more sociable than usual, and you can have a certain amount of impact, but you certainly shouldn't expect a huge amount to be going on in your social life. It just means that you can have gentle contact, you know how to behave, you know what to say, you can at the very least go through the motions of friendship, and you don't have to make any commitment. So that does make things kind of easy for you, though we do have a conjunction between the Sun and Saturn, and it's possible that Sun-Saturn conjunction is optional. I mean, it is an important aspect. It could have an impact on you, but if you want it to, if you want to be super serious, you don't have to be super serious, but if you want to be super serious, if you make the decision that that's what you want to be, then it does seem that you really can have quite a powerful impact, and you can really get noticed, and you can get noticed as a person who is very focused and very determined. That is Sun conjunct Saturn, and it might all be an impression. You might want to really create an image of having this kind of focus. It may not be entirely what you feel, but it might be what people expect. And if you are determined, or give the impression of being determined, then people are going to be impressed, and they'll take you seriously. You can be taken as seriously as you want to be today. You don't have to be taken seriously at all. There's no obligation, but you might feel that you want to see it through. And so what we're really talking about is you taking an aspect, Sun conjunct Saturn, and deciding what you want to do with it. And it is entirely up to you. And if you want to create something of incredible quality that is a fundamental and serious expression of who you are, that is entirely possible. And so that might be important to you. But again, there's no sense of obligation here. Now, one other thing about the moon moving into Virgo is that it starts the countdown to the full moon. And we do have a full moon on Friday. Could even be late on Thursday if you're in California, for example. Very late on Thursday. And with this full moon, you might be thinking or starting to think about your relationship with other people, not one-to-one relationships, but your relationship to the group. What group are you part of? And how does that relate to who you are? Do you want to be a member of something? Does it make you feel good being a member of something? Or does it define you in a way that you don't want to be defined? And that's a difficult decision to make. Membership and community is important, especially now that the moon is moving into Virgo. But at the same time, Scorpios are a very independent-minded sign, and you don't like the idea of being labelled. And over the next couple of days, this is an issue that you might want to consider. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, we have a run-up to the full moon. Full moon is by and large on Friday. A few people might experience that exact full moon very late on Thursday. If you're in, I don't know, California, Alaska, Hawaii. But for most of us, it's on Friday, this full moon. And the run-up is starting because the moon is moving into Virgo, and it's therefore in the opposite sign to Pisces. Of course, we've got the Sun in Pisces, and this full moon might be about your concepts of your future, where you think you happen to be going, and you are becoming a little ambitious with this moon moving into Virgo, perhaps just more ambitious than usual, but you still have this question about where exactly are you going with the moon moving into Virgo? Because the moon, when it moves into Virgo, it doesn't immediately make any aspects. I mean, it does eventually make a square to Jupiter, but not today. And so you might feel that a change has happened, but you're not quite sure where this change is going. And you don't have to make any decisions at the moment. You just have to, be open-minded and make yourself available to sort of new options, new possibilities with the moon moving into Virgo, and not allow yourself to be tied to the past. And the reason you might feel a little bit tied to the past is the fact that the Sun is making a conjunction to Saturn today. And that Sun conjunct Saturn does have an impact on you. I've been talking about this Sun conjunct Saturn for a few days now. And this Sun conjunct Saturn could actually be quite rigid. It may make you feel that you can't do anything, that you don't want to do anything. And you could actually be quite stubborn about it. And this is going to be especially the case if you spend a lot of time in your home or spend a lot of time with your family. When you're at home with this Sun conjunct Saturn, your home almost drags you in, and you might find it just a little bit too much. So it's certainly safe to stay in one place, at least on a physical level. You stay in one place, you don't take risks. But psychologically, it could actually be quite exhausting. And the moon moving into Virgo is kind of asking you to think about other possibilities. Don't be stuck in one place. There's a whole world out there that you need to address, and you've got to think about where you want to go. So you can't be stuck. So we might be seeing a sort of an argument, or at least a conversation, between the moon on one hand, which is in Virgo, is trying to make sense of the world, is trying to carve out a path, and then that conversation is with Sun conjunct Saturn, which can be quite a stubborn force. So that's something you are going to have to work out. And also, if you're feeling a little bit negative, what you should ask yourself, Sagittarius, is, what are you actually good at? Because there are clearly certain things you're really good at, and at the moment these things are obvious. They are where you are putting your energy. Where do you naturally want to put your energy into? What makes you feel good? If you're feeling frustrated and then you put your energy into something that is just a fundamental expression of who you are, then your frustration levels will immediately diminish. And those things which you are good at are, in some respects, the key. Because once you're doing something you're good at, really good at, then you feel fulfilled, and you also feel secure, and you're actually able to project it in terms of your ambitions. Capricorn, the moon is changing sign, and I think that's a good thing. Moon moving out of Leo into Virgo. With the moon in Leo, it was a little bit negative, and you were perhaps being a little bit too introspective with the moon in Leo. You're thinking about things that could go wrong. It seemed a serious, heavy world, and you didn't want to take risks. But now the moon is in Virgo, it does feel as if there are more possibilities and more options. And that's especially the case because the moon, certainly at the beginning of Virgo, doesn't actually make any aspects. It's free flowing. It can do what it likes. And so it might be a time, Capricorn, when you want to explore, see what is available, and you're not taking any risks, and you're not committing yourself, and you're expanding your mind. And the lack of commitment is important at the moment. Of course, if you keep exploring and you keep trying to understand what is available out there, at a certain stage, you might reach a point where you think, hold on, something might have to change. Have you understood the full picture? You might be asking yourself those kind of questions. Maybe not today, because the moon is not really making any aspects. But the moon, when it moves into Virgo, is starting to become full. Because when the moon goes into Virgo, it's in the opposite sign to the sun. You've got sun in Pisces, moon in Virgo. So it's starting to become full. And by the end of the working week, it will be full, by Friday or even late Thursday. And so that might be a point where you start to see things, for the way they really are. And you might then have to have a change of approach. That really is a possibility. And while the moon is moving into Virgo, the sun is making a conjunction to Saturn, and that provides us with a different message. At least on the surface, it's a different message. So Saturn is you, and Saturn is conjunct the sun, and that sun conjunct Saturn may be a moment where things switch. So because the Saturn is combust, it may have felt that over the last couple of days there was some kind of force that was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. It was becoming overwhelming. It might have been something quite internal, and might have sort of related to the fact that when the moon was in Leo, you felt that things were a bit heavy. But it wasn't just about the moon in Leo; it was the fact that the sun was moving towards a conjunction of Saturn, and things were coming to the surface, and you were wondering, whether or not you should be doing things. There may have been issues of lack of confidence with the sun moving towards a conjunction of Saturn. But now that the sun is exactly conjunct with Saturn, like it is today, it's a cazimi conjunction. And a cazimi conjunction is, when it is within 17 arc minutes, and a cazimi conjunction is often seen as something being fortunate. So what used to be a problem, something being overwhelming, has suddenly become a liberation, because you're on the same wavelength of a very thing that you thought was a problem. And so being on the same wavelength may actually be just a sense of oneness, or a moment of oneness where everything makes sense and you have complete clarity. And that might be something going on today. And that sense of clarity, you'll be able to see it through as that full moon becomes exact. So for you, I actually think that this Sun conjunct Saturn could actually be quite fortunate for you. It might not seem like it, but it's about you just understanding things and realizing that what you thought was a problem might actually might actually be an opportunity. And you just get a sense that you are on the right path, and the complications of a very recent past will start to clear. Aquarius, the moon is moving into Virgo, and that might mean that things might be becoming just a little bit more complicated, because you're having to think things through a little more. You're having to work them out, and you thought that something was simple, and you look under the surface and there are just a lot more details involved than you realized existed. And so you have to really engage with it and not be panicked. The moon does move into Virgo, but it doesn't actually make any aspects in Virgo. It doesn't make any aspects at the beginning of Virgo. The moon is actually starting to make a full moon, but that full moon isn't for a day or two. So with the moon in Virgo, you just have an awareness that things are going to take longer than expected, and that there are more details than you'd realized. And that could just be about hard work or reading the instruction manual and not making assumptions. And while this is going on, the sun is exactly conjunct Saturn. And from an Aquarian perspective, that's important, because Saturn is your ruler. And with Sun conjunct Saturn, it could work in several different ways. It could work in a very positive way. It could also work in a very negative way. And that does depend on you. Now, one way of looking at the Sun conjunct Saturn is to say that Saturn is combust. Saturn is you're the ruler. That Saturn is ruler of Aquarius. It is combust. It is overwhelmed by the sun. And that might say something about other people. Other people can be overwhelming. And their presence can be difficult to deal with, and you might feel that there's a certain loss of power. That's one possibility. An alternative view is that this conjunction is cazimi. And in the jargon, a cazimi conjunction is a conjunction which is exact. William Lilly, I think he says within 17 arc minutes. And the cazimi conjunction is actually seen to be fortunate. And it might be that you and another person arrive at a complete understanding of one another. And once you understand each other, you'll know where to take things. And so it could work in different ways for different relationships. Certain people could be overwhelming. They could cramp your style, they could get in your way, they could restrict your freedom. Other people, if you take the cazimi interpretation of the conjunction, could be exactly on your wavelength, and existing relationships could really prosper with Sun conjunct Saturn, provided they are the right relationships. If it is a relationship which is good and which is healthy and wholesome, then today it should work really well. If it's a relationship that is dysfunctional, then it's going to be even more dysfunctional than usual. So in terms of relationships, we could argue that this Sun-Saturn conjunction is an intensifier, an accelerator. It intensifies the good, but unfortunately it also intensifies the bad. But that might give you a certain sense of revelation. You actually start to see what relationships are really about. And relationships of all kinds. So whatever relationship you're in today, or the pattern of relationships with the Sun conjunct Saturn, you start to see what it's really like, and you're in a position to really make decisions. And some people, you might realize you really need them in your life. They can be a major plus. Other people, do you really need these people? These people are getting you down. You see the truth. So, why persist with a difficult situation for any longer? And there is a sense socially, in terms of the people around you, that things in certain quarters are a little bit stuck. And that is because certain people are revealing their hand. They are revealing themselves to really not be of any use to you. They're stuck in the past. They want to do things on their terms. And Aquarius, is it necessary to continue with the situation? I don't think it is. Pisces. The Moon is moving into Virgo, and that means that the full moon is upon us. So the full moon is exact in a day or two's time, and we've got the moon in Virgo, sun in Pisces. So that opposition is starting, and the emphasis is on other people. And it's not just you. I've just been talking to Aquarius, and I think that for Aquarians, it's a very socially based day when they can make a lot of decisions about whether or not certain people can be trusted, whether or not they should be part of their lives, and so on. And with you, Pisces, the moon is moving into Virgo, so you have to accept other people's influence. You don't have to give in to other people's influence, but you have to be observing things. And to begin with, when the moon moves into Virgo, you might not feel much, because the moon doesn't make any aspects, at least no major aspects to major planets at the beginning of Virgo. So that doesn't happen today. So at first, with the moon moving into Virgo, you just may be in a position where you start to see people, you start to understand people, but you don't actually have to do anything. You don't necessarily feel the pressure. And also, you're quite capable of looking after yourself. because we've got a Sun conjunct Saturn in Pisces, and so that Sun conjunct Saturn does really allow you to look after your own interests, and if you want to, you can actually be quite tough, and people are unlikely to contradict you, and you can create a sort of a fairly tough persona, and people realize that then you're not someone to cross. And if you want to stick to something, you believe something is important, Pisces, then just keep going. Be persistent, be stubborn, and in the end, people will leave you alone, or they might even come round to your way of thinking. So that is always a possibility, especially if you can show a new side to your personality. Show the world that you can do something and they didn't know you could do it, and you reveal an ability, and people notice that you're revealing an ability, and they're impressed by it, and they start to want to know more, and soon enough they realize that you've actually got a unique talent. And so so don't be shy. You might want to be shy with that Sun conjunct Saturn. You might feel that certain things have to be kept to yourself, because if you were to reveal them, you might be compromising yourself. But today, I don't really think that it is possible to really compromise yourself. So it's okay to be open and honest, because I don't really think that you'll be doing yourself any harm. And some people might respect your toughness as well as your genius, though do give other people space with the moon moving into Virgo. Let people be themselves, because the moon will become more influential as it moves through Virgo, as we move towards that full moon at the end of a week, very late Thursday or into Friday. And that full moon, of course, is right across the main axis of your chart, so it's an important full moon. That Virgo full moon generally happens once a year, and it tends to be important for Pisceans. And when I do your horoscope for Friday, I will be going into detail about this full moon and what it might mean. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. And I ask the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 25, which is innocence. And this hexagram, in its raw form, is extolling the virtues of innocence. We shouldn't expect things, and if we don't expect things, then things can happen which are going to be good. It's always the case, isn't it? If we really want something to happen and we're always thinking about it, well, it never happens. And so normally 25 innocence would just be about just relaxing, not worrying about the future, and just let the future develop in its own way, and unexpected things will happen, and very often they will be good things. The problem with this hexagram is that it is the third line that moves, and the third line in the I Ching is often an unfortunate line. And when we think about innocence, we think about just being relaxed, let's see what happens, but different things can happen. And what could happen is something gets taken from us. We are too innocent. We are too trusting. And the image the I Ching gives us with this third line moving is of a cow being tethered to one's house. And it's a village, it's in the middle of nowhere, and you why not? Why can't you tether your cow to your house? And then a stranger comes through the village, and They see the cow and they just take it. And you lost your cow. And you could say that's real innocence, being too trusting. You think it's the right thing to do. Indeed, it is the right thing to do. So you do the right thing. You are trusting. You are innocent. And even though you do the right thing, you don't get rewarded for it. And it's just your loss, someone else's gain. And so I think there is a warning here that you don't want to be too trusting. But also the I Ching is warning us of the problem of planning. And there is this idea that if we make the effort to plan for the future, it's all for nothing. We think we know how it's going to work out, and it just doesn't work out like that. And so planning is supposed to be a good thing. And the problem is that we are making our plans on the basis of the past. I mean, that's how planning works. It's very difficult to anticipate what is going to happen next. And we like to use examples from the past to make our plans for the future. We do this all the time, in sort of history. For example, people in the Second World War, when they were planning the Second World War, they were thinking about the First World War. They were thinking about trenches, and they thought that's a way to do it. You do create something like the Maginot Line. But they didn't change. Or now people are thinking, their big thing, Munich, betrayal. It's all about betrayal and appeasement. People are obsessed about appeasement, and that's how you need to think about your wars. So people are always fighting the previous war. And that can be a problem. So if we try to plan for the future, whoever we are, and we have this rigid plan, maybe it's to do with the fact that there's a conjunction between Sun and Saturn today. Sun and Saturn might make us more rigid than usual. And we have our planning, we think we've done it well, and it just doesn't work out. So there are a couple of ways of interpreting this hexagram with that moving line, but the ways are not necessarily fortunate. So it's important that we don't trust anyone, but also don't try to second guess the future. And if you plan for the future, you think your plans for the future are going to make you safer. They might actually make you less safe in certain situations. And with this moving line, we do get a movement to a second hexagram, and we move to hexagram number 13, which is fellowship with others. The Wynkoop translation calls this hexagram with others. The Wilhelm translation calls it fellowship with men. So I thought I'd sort of combine the two, fellowship with others. That means it doesn't have a sort of gender connotations, but it still has this idea of fellowship. And I think that there is this idea, particularly given the previous hexagram, that we do need other people's help, other people's assistance. And obviously we don't want to be too trusting. It's certainly not a time for being trusting. So we don't want to overdo the trust, but we need to accept that we can't do everything on our own. And if we're part of a group, part of a well-organized group, not just being with people for the sake of it, if we act in a sort of a communal way, then maybe there's a way around the problem. If we go back to that village, you tether the cow to your house, you assume that nothing bad is going to happen. But what were the other villagers doing? Did they do anything? Did they prevent the cow being stolen? Well, maybe if people had been more collective about it and people hadn't made assumptions about it being a crime-free village, there wouldn't have been a problem. So that may also be about looking after one another. And in going back to the previous hexagram, losing your cow, it might be about getting your phone stolen. So today, be extra careful about about theft. Don't assume that things won't be stolen. Don't don't exhibit your wealth, or walk around with your phone in a prominent position. Or so just don't be too trusting today, and that's probably the best way of handling it. And also, for some strange reason, don't be too concerned about preparing for the future, because preparations for the future may not work out. And so now I am going to look at the conjunction between the Sun and Saturn. So today's the day it happens, and here is the conjunction. That's a precise moment it happens. It happens today on Wednesday at Wednesday, March the 12th at 10:29 a.m. London time. So that means New York time. It will take place at 6:29 a.m. because at the moment London and New York are only 4 hours apart. And the Sun-Saturn conjunction happens once a year, and it can be quite a difficult influence, because the Sun and Saturn could actually be damaging each other. Saturn is combust. Saturn can't fully function unless you take the view that the Sun and Saturn are cazimi. The cazimi conjunction within 17 arc minutes. So maybe it's about structure, and perhaps the best possible way of looking at the Sun-Saturn conjunction is about being able to organize things, structure things, being able to deal with the chaos. But it's not a happy aspect. It's a little bit grim and determined, and we want to do things. I'm sorry about the noise. There's some truck. I don't know what it's doing. It's cleaning drains or something. And I suppose that might be a good way to prepare for Sun conjunct Saturn in Pisces, removing blockages from drains. I don't know what the truck is doing, but it's making a lot of noise. And so this Sun-Saturn conjunction is possibly going to have an impact on the world at large. People are trying to sort things out. People are trying to negotiate. I think I read somewhere, I think it was maybe in the Harvey Campion and Bajent book on mundane astrology. Is this a book? I don't know. It's been around for some time, but Bajent, Campion and Harvey, they wrote in their book on mundane astrology, I think they wrote that when you have Sun-Saturn aspects that can coincide with peace talks. Correct me if I'm wrong. I might have got that wrong, but I think it said something like that. And so I know that Zelensky's in Saudi Arabia. I don't know quite what Zelensky wants to achieve in Saudi Arabia, but he's in Saudi Arabia. So it may be that there's sort of attempts at peace talks. I don't think these peace talks are going to go anywhere, by the way, if there are any peace talks. So that could be an effect of the Sun-Saturn conjunction, on the world. And it's always a good idea to look at the structure of this Sun-Saturn conjunction in terms of its midpoints. So here's the Sun-Saturn conjunction on the 90-degree dial, and the Sun-Saturn conjunction is on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So there's Sun-Saturn, and then the Mars-Uranus midpoint is 0 degrees and 50 minutes away from the Sun-Saturn conjunction. So that might indicate that it's quite a stressful thing, this Sun-Saturn conjunction. Mars-Uranus is about violence and explosive events. You could say that Sun-Saturn is trying to control those explosive events, or it may just be how people respond to an explosive global situation, what we are in at the moment. And so I think this emphasizes a point that the Sun-Saturn conjunction is rather difficult. There's nothing easy about it. Now, there are certain people who might be impacted by this Sun-Saturn conjunction. There also may be countries impacted by it. And one country I noticed that might be especially impacted by this is Romania. So here is the moment of the Sun-Saturn conjunction set for Bucharest, the capital of Romania. And in this chart, Saturn, there's a Sun-Saturn conjunction. It's exactly on the midheaven, pretty close to the midheaven. And also, we've got Mars on the ascendant. So this Sun-Saturn conjunction really does key into what's going on in Romania, because what we've got in Romania is, from what I can see, it's sort of the end of democracy. There is this candidate for the presidential election. He did very well in the original election. He did well in the first round, but the powers that be, via the judicial system, are now trying to prevent him from standing. Because they don't like his opinions, basically. I mean, they come up with all sorts of reasons why he shouldn't be standing. And, of course, this has led to protests. And I do actually want to have a video on Romania, sooner rather than later, to look at the astrology of Romania. But I do think that this Sun-Saturn conjunction is going to have a big impact on that country. And, of course, we've got the full moon coming up. And we've already got protests. And how can it be that a country can just suspend democracy because they don't like a president? They don't like their president. And we're going to probably be seeing more of this in Europe. Now, in terms of a few people who may be influenced by the Sun-Saturn conjunction, just a couple. We have Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London. So Sadiq Khan is a controversial mayor of London. A lot of people blame him for knife crime and so forth in London. I don't live in London. I haven't been to London for 6 years, so I don't know for sure. But Sadiq Khan has his Mars at 22 Virgo. So this Sun-Saturn conjunction is going to be opposition his Mars. So the next few days may be quite stressful for him. He might be under a lot of pressure. He might be under attack. His policies might be under attack. And there may be a lot of criticism of what he's doing. And another politician who is being attacked, a politician who's actually been shot quite recently, is Robert Fico, the Prime Minister of Slovakia. And he was born September the 15th, 1964, and he has got his sun at 2237 Virgo. I don't have a time of birth for Robert Fico. So he's born quite close to Sadiq Khan, and there is this Sun-Saturn conjunction is opposition his sun. With Saturn opposition his sun, he is under pressure. He's under political pressure. There have been big protests in Bratislava, the capital. One never knows with these protests in Bratislava, because Bratislava is somewhat different from the rest of the country. It doesn't vote for him. Plus, we don't know to what extent non-governmental organizations and the EU and others are encouraging these protests, but he does seem to be under pressure, and his position as Prime Minister may also be under pressure. And we shouldn't forget that there's already been an assassination attempt on him. And staying with, broadly speaking, that part of the world, but going further east, Dmitry Medvedev was born the year after Robert Fico. So Dmitry Medvedev, he, I think, was Prime Minister of Russia at some point. He was alternating with Putin. He's obviously not prime minister or president of Russia at the moment, but he's still an influential person, and he does have his sun at 21 Virgo. So the Sun Saturn conjunction is opposition his sun. Maybe he's under pressure. I mean, the Ukrainians might want to attack him in some way. I mean, they like to assassinate people. That seems to be something they do. And so he probably needs to be careful. He's got his sun in Virgo, opposition Chiron in Pisces. Maybe something to do with internal politics in Russia. I mean, he's quite strident in his views. I mean, he always used to be thought of as the one who was sort of more pro-Western than Putin. But if you look at what he's saying on his Telegram channel, he is quite clear about what he thinks should happen to Ukraine. And he's, by contrast, Putin is quite moderate in terms of the Ukraine war. Medvedev is really quite tough in his approach. He almost likes to encourage a reaction by what he says. So there might be changes going on with Dmitry Medvedev. We might not hear about these changes, but he could feel pressured by it all. Turning to the US and Barack Obama. Barack Obama has got his Mars at 22 Virgo. So Barack Obama has this Sun conjunct Saturn opposition his Mars. So he's got Saturn opposition his Mars. That is a tough aspect, and the Sun is triggering it. Now, that might say something about his relationship with his wife, with Michelle Obama. I mean, that's most likely to be the case. So that could represent marital strife. Could also say something about his public image or what he's privately concerned about. And returning to Europe, finally, the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk. So Donald Tusk, we do have a time of birth for Donald Tusk, and he was born on April 22nd, so he's an early Taurus, but he's got his Mars at 22 Gemini, and he's got a Mars-Jupiter square at, so Mars at 22 Gemini, Jupiter at 2256 Virgo. So what that means is that Sun conjunct, that Sun Saturn conjunction is really hitting him pretty closely. There's the Sun Saturn conjunction. You can see that it is opposition his Jupiter. It's very close to the square of his Mars. So this may say something about his political role, how he conducts himself, how he deals with Russia, and Europe is trying to create some kind of defense pact against Russia, supposedly defense. I'm not quite sure what they're afraid of, and military spending, but he's really going to have to stand up for himself politically, or he's going to want to stand up for himself, and he may feel a certain sense of frustration, but he may also feel that he has to do something to break from that frustration. So Donald Tusk is someone who we might want to look at over the next few days. So that's it. Those are some thoughts on Sun conjunct Saturn. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be very grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.